Morning. This is the Unknown Mechanic back again, and today we're going to look at a vintage Stihl chainsaw. And you get to look over my shoulder while I try to troubleshoot it and repair it. And before I get started, I always like to have some of my regular Joe, but my local coffee house that I go to informed me that the Sleepy Joe blend that I'm used to was replaced by something new called Calamitous Brew. So let's see how good this is. Oh, that's awful. Oh, I'm not going to order that again. Oh, all right, on to the saw. Let's see, who does this belong to? Okay, this saw is owned by Fracas Danderscratch, and it says, won't start, repair as needed. Okay, well, I always start with a visual inspection, and it's an oldie. It's an 050 AV, and looks like there might be a little hole in the muffler here. Not too bad, but not perfect. Okay, that all looks intact. Let's see. Okay, the air filter has been updated. The original air filter was a wire mesh with flocking glued on it. And those had a tendency for the flocking just to come off and leave the mesh. And that would allow dirt to just bypass the air filter and go right into the engine. This one, it's not an aftermarket. It is a genuine OEM Stihl. So it's got Stihl name on it there. And it's definitely a felt, which is superior. So this is a good upgrade. You always want to also check the customer's fuel. Never trust the customer's fuel. It may have water in it, it may be old and stale, it may not have any oil in it. I'm going to dump that out and take a look. Okay, that smells fresh. It's got a green tint to it, so I know it has oil in it. That's good. And I know that a video like this is to a very niche audience. There's not very many 050s around. It's a real antique. However, the troubleshooting techniques and the tools that I'm going to show you and demonstrate the use of will apply to all the modern stuff as well. So it's for everybody. Trying to help out the do-it-yourselfer as well as the shop owner. Sometimes a shop owner doesn't have the technicians that are right up to par, and they need to know this stuff, how to do it the right way without making mistakes. Get into that a little bit later. Next thing I'm going to do is test the spark. I'll look at the spark plug, take the plug out and look at it. Okay, it's a Bosch, a WS5F. We're going to update that. This has the removable terminal. Stihl doesn't approve of the removable terminal plugs. They want a solid terminal on there. So I'm going to update that probably with an NGK. We'll get to that later. Spark testers. This is an old school Briggs & Stratton tester, and the gap is 166 thousandths. I'm going to be using this today because it does not have a plastic shield like the modern testers have plastic shields now for quite some time actually. And is that my chair or is that my back? Well, it could be my back. I better check. Let's see. Okay, good. It was the chair. It's not my back. All right, so this tester, you'll be able to better see the spark without the plastic shield on the camera. However, if you were to use this type of old school tester and you had a flooded engine and this was near the spark plug hole, and you pulled the rope testing for spark and the flooded engine were to blow gas out the plug hole, there would be a fire. So I'm just using this today only for the test purpose so you can better see. So you want to make sure that the ignition is on, and I'm going to bring the camera in for a close-up and we're going to test the spark. Okay, that's pretty good. So I'm confident about that. All right. Now you do have to be kind of careful about the gap on these testers. And I ran into a situation recently where, you know, I had a lot of crappy mechanics that work for me. You know, we had Scratch, and we have Dingus and Gomer, and we can't forget Sniffles. I had to let Sniffles go because all Sniffles did was, when nobody was looking, he'd five-finger steal money out of the drawer every day. So I had to get rid of him. So, but anyway, recently Dingus was working on an MS-193T, and you know, he diagnosed the unit with no spark and said the ignition module was faulty and wanted to order a new ignition module. And I thought that was rather odd because I had zero sales history on that part, and nobody had ever had one fail before. They're very reliable. But we ordered one, and you know, Dingus put it on, took the old module off, put the new module on, and oh well, there's still no spark, it won't start. And you know, I have to clean up everybody else's mess, and so I had to fix it. and that's all I do is fix other people's mistakes. So, in looking at it, I checked, and the ignition module on the 193, 192, the 194, that family of saws, when you're testing it, it's only supposed to jump a 2 millimeter gap. And these modern testers, they have a micrometer adjust, and each turn is a millimeter. So it's supposed to be about two turns out, and that's what it jumps. And he was trying to use a Briggs & Stratton tester with 166 thousandths gap, and that's about 4.5 millimeters. So, I took the new module off, put it back in stock on our shelf, and I put the original module back on there, and it had spark, and then I repaired whatever issue. I don't remember what it was, but it was not the ignition, and fixed it. So that reminds me of looking in the archives to get information on this vintage saw. I had to go way back, and there is some information in here on the 051. This one doesn't even go back far enough to the 050. But one of the first things in the book is if you don't have time to do a job right, how are you going to find time to do it again? And that's an important little information. So anyway, I'm satisfied with the spark on this saw, and I know that this unit, it does not have an E on the model suffix, and it does not say electronic next to the model number. So that would indicate that it is pre-electronic ignition. It has points and condenser. And maybe another day we'll get an old saw that has points and condenser, and even though those are dinosaurs and you're never going to run into them in the future, just so for nostalgia, you can see what a real tune-up was like on an old point and condenser saw back in the day. Maybe we'll do one in the future. We'll see. Anyway, the next thing I would want to do, I could talk a little bit about their model numbering system. It's gone through a lot of evolution over the decades, and when Stihl first began marketing their saws in North America, they had an 020, an 030, an 040, 050, 070, 090, and they started to add more and more numbers, and they had some systems where for a while the even numbers were considered professional, and the odd model numbers were considered homeowner. And they had some exceptions to that, because I can remember there was an 010, and that was a homeowner saw. And then later on they had to scrap that because they were starting to run out of model numbers. So right around Y2K, they decided to move the first digit to the back of the numeric part, and then they would add, they added a alpha prefix. And so now all the saws since Y2K are called MS, and that is the German code for Motorsagen. And they can't keep their number, they just keep running out of numbers. The next thing that's coming is a lot of their part numbers now are going to be alphanumeric. That's coming, and they've run out of numbers. So, Honda has alphanumeric part numbers, and so Stihl is going to go that way as well. And you're going to see more and more of that in the future. But Next, we want to check the compression. And I do want to mention that on a two-cycle engine, there's what's, the compression above the piston rings, and then there's also compression, momentary compression below the piston rings in the lower part of the engine, the crankcase area, the intake track. So there's alternating vacuum and pressure below the piston rings. The compression gauge that I'm going to put in here is only going to be testing the compression above the rings, the top end compression. And it's going to be a little difficult to get it in because the handle's in the way. But I'll see if I can get it in there. Okay, I think I got it. Okay. All right, and let's see. For this test, you want to make sure the choke is open. Let's see. Just check that. I want the engine to be, the choke needs to be open for this test. Turn the ignition off too. Let's see what we got. Okay. Well, it's about 130. Yeah, that's pretty good. If it took numerous pulls, 20, 30 pulls to get it up to maximum pressure before it peaked, that's a bad sign. You want it to reach its maximum reading 3 to 5 pulls. So I think we're pretty good there. I'm going to look at my this stuff. Some of this stuff actually came out of the catacombs below the archives. That's how old it is. Okay, it says for a new cold engine for an 051, not an 050, it's 120 to 150. For a broken-in cold engine, it should be 130 to 150. So, we're in there. Also found this information researching this. So the 050 was manufactured from 1968 through 1972, and at that point, from 72 to 85, it was updated and replaced by the 051. So this saw could be, that old, 68 through 72. Now the next thing I want to do, we've done the compression gauge, we've done the spark test. I want to pressure test the fuel line and carburetor. I've already drained the fuel out. I've got my little tool here to go fishing for the line. See if we can get that out of there. Pretty accessible. That is old school. That's original. I've never even seen one like that. that is what is left of the fuel filter element. It's supposed to be 10 times that size. This looks like a shrunken head. That is disintegrated. There's some remnants of it here in the cap. Here's some there. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, there's remnants of it in there too. There's a very coarse screen and a weight. And I'm going to have to upgrade that. The modern stuff is different. The filter is different, and it's more reliable. Get this off first. There's more pieces of it coming out of there. Okay, there's a very coarse screen, and that's too coarse. It will allow the disintegrated filtering element to just go upstream, downstream, I guess the better term. And that there's always two fuel filters in a chainsaw. There's a primary in-tank filter, and anything that gets by the primary filter will hopefully get caught in the secondary filter, which is inside the carburetor. Now, we could find remnants of this rotten fuel filter in the secondary filter in the carburetor. That's a possibility. Maybe that's why it won't start. So the next step is you got to have yourself a pressure tester. And we're going to connect this. And we have no leaks. No leaks. Okay, so all the way, the fuel line going all the way up to the carburetor and pressure testing the carburetor, there are no leaks. So at this point, we do want to probably put a newer filter on this and use our shop fuel. And I'm going to take it outside. I'm not going to start it in the shop. It's going to be too much smoke. I don't like running saws in the shop. It makes a lot of smoke and a lot of noise. So I'm going to have to turn the camera off, move the camera, and take the saw outside. And we're going to I like this is a Shindaiwa carburetor adjusting screwdriver. We're going to be checking our initial settings and trying to start the saw. And if it won't start, I'm going to be using a primer and bypassing the carburetor and priming it and see if it will start and run on a prime. And that will help me diagnose whether it's the carburetor. If it runs well when I'm priming it, then I don't need to vacuum and pressure test the crankcase. Remember, I mentioned that 2 cycles there is vacuum and pressure below the piston rings. You can't just be concerned with the compression pressure that's measured by this gauge. If the seals are 50, 60 years old and the rubber has hardened on the crankshaft seals, or this has an exterior pulse line from the crankcase to the fuel pump on the carburetor, if that impulse hose has rotten and fallen apart, there will be an air leak either at the crankshaft seals or the impulse hose, or maybe even some kind of gasket under the the intake stack. And these 2-cycle engines, I don't care if it's a blower or string trimmer or chainsaw, the lower crankcase has to be airtight. There can't be any air leaks. That will upset the ratio. The carburetor is supposed to mix 14.5 to 1 part gasoline by weight. That's the ratio for a gasoline engine, 14.5 to 1. And you fine tune that adjustment with your carburetor high and low needle settings to get it to run the best. And if it's drawing air from another source than here, from bad crankshaft seals or a bad impulse line or some gasket, your 14.5 to 1 ratio is going to be way off, and the engine's going to idle really high or not even going to run at all if the air leak is big. And I'll be able to tell, when I'm running it, if I start it and prime it and I can get it to run well and idle with using my primer, then I don't really need to do a pressure and vacuum test. I can just, go on with overhauling the carburetor. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pause the camera, and then we're going to move outside and do part 2. Okay, back again with the 050. And had been waiting for some parts to come in, but I think I have what I need. Before I take it outside and attempt to start it, I am going to update the fuel pickup all the way from the filter to the carburetor. And I'm glad I decided to do that because I did find several problems. This is what was in there. This is original. Very, very outdated. Also with being collapsed in there, it looks like there might be a kink. It's very easy for that to kink and close off the fuel supply. And then from the fitting to the carburetor, I found a Frankenstein line. Somebody had cut a piece of Tygon and pushed it onto a smaller diameter tube, and that would account for the original style line. It stepped from a large fitting on the fuel elbow to a small fitting on the carburetor. And so you have to have a molded line that's large on one end and small on the other end. And obviously that line is long since obsolete and outdated, no longer available. I suppose you could take one of these. This is the one that goes in the tank, and you could cut it. But I'm not going to do that. I am going to be upgrading everything. Originally, I tried to see if the modern hose would stretch far enough to fit over the large fitting and just use one piece of hose. And Stihl does make this press fluid to make the rubber parts slippery and make them easier to push together. They use that on anti-vibration mounts, fuel hoses, impulse hoses, grommets, a number of different rubber things to aid in assembly. But I could not get this hose over that fitting. And so what I was able to do, I was able to find a used fitting of a more modern saw, an 051 076, and this fitting is the same size as the fitting on the carburetor. So I'm going to be eliminating the original and updating to this, and that will allow me to use one hose and no Frankenstein hose. So Stihl, also on the fuel filters, it originally called out for this style of filter, and I've got lots of those in stock. That's the part number. And this felt sock was an optional addition, that you could push this felt sock over the outside of this standard filter. But I'm going to even go a little bit better. Most of the new Pro Stihl saws are using this filter, and that's the part number. And there was a service bulletin on this, and when they went to the orange color, that indicated that the micron size of the screen, the outer screen, is finer than the white screen, and so that's how they identified the difference. They went orange instead of white, and then you could easily tell. I'm going to be using this filter and no sleeve. Then they also had a service bulletin on their fuel line. And, the book, when you look up lines for an 051, it says to use R3 line, which is 1.3 millimeter ID, 5.7 millimeter OD, and then you measure it out and you cut it to the length that they specify. And I've already done that. The fuel line calls out for 13.5 millimeters, and the impulse line calls out for 12. And I think that they've got that backwards, because the distance from this fitting to the carburetor is a lot shorter than the distance from the impulse fitting around the carburetor to the fuel pump on the back of the carburetor. So on your fuel intake line, you really don't need to add excess more than you need. That's just going to make the saw harder to cold start. There is no purge bulb on a saw this old. If there was a purge bulb, then it wouldn't matter how long the fuel line was. But on a choke system, all this has is a choke. You want as short as possible. And you also do not want a large diameter pickup line. The bigger the diameter of the pickup line, the more internal volume it has, and the more pulls of the starter rope it's going to take for the fuel pump to drive fuel up that line and get to the carburetor. So the customer also has a Tygon line instead of the Stihl black rubber hose. And Tygon is pretty good stuff in certain applications, but I do not like to use it for an impulse line. Sometimes the fitting back here on the engine, the crankcase fitting, can get very, very hot. And if it gets hot enough, this Tygon will soften in the heat and can pop off. And the other problem is that over a long period of time, the hot engine impulse fitting will bake this and harden it. And that's kind of what I found wrong. I don't think the heat baked this one. Probably gasoline is what did it. This little Frankenstein piece that he's got on here is hard as a rock. It's petrified. So we're definitely going to be upgrading that. To cut this this bulk hose, I like this tool. This is a really good tool. it cuts the tubing very, very square. I really like this for cutting all types of fuel line. It's a must-have. The other problem I ran into was that when I took off the air cleaner base, one of the studs backed out of the insulator block, and so I'm gonna need to Loctite this end and double nut this end and put that back down in there and secure that. Last thing I'm going to do before I try to start it is I'm going to change the plug, and I have been able to find, I was having trouble finding these. This is a Bosch WSR6F, and what's beneficial about this plug is it's got a solid top. Okay, Stihl wants a solid top on their spark plugs. The other benefit is that it is pre-gapped. It is pre-gapped for Stihl. So it's 0.5 millimeters, 20,000ths of an inch. I don't have to re-gap that plug. On the NGKs, you do have to, most of the time, shorten the gap down to 20. So I'm going to be putting a new plug in here, and I'm going to be replumbing the impulse and the fuel supply, and then I'm going to try to start it. And you don't need to see all the nuts and bolts. I don't want to make the video longer than necessary, so I'm going to do that, and then we're going to take it outside and try to start it.